Hot Springs Village Inside Out is a closer look at the greatness of Hot Springs Village, Arkansas and the surrounding areas. People, places, experiences. Hot Springs Village is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host Dennis Simpson as we engage in weekly conversations to explore Hot Springs Village Inside Out. Today's show is brought to you by Central Arkansas's favorite radio station, KVRE. Find them on the dial at 92.9 FM. Stream them live at kvre.com. RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village. The award-winning RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village is the largest real estate office inside the village with over 30 full-time agents and support staff. Visit them to learn more about this beautiful place to solve your real estate needs. Call them today at 1-800-364-9007. Find them online at explorehsv.com. They are RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village at 1-800-364-9007 or online at explorehsv.com. Ike Eisenhower State Farm. Ike and his award-winning team have been serving the insurance needs of folks all around Hot Springs Village since 1998. Ike has qualified for State Farm's President's Club, Chairman's Circle, and Hot Springs Village Insurance Agent of the Year. Call Ike Eisenhower State Farm today at 501-984-4100. That's 501-984-4100. Find them online at ikeeisenhower.net. Call them today for all your insurance needs because, like a good neighbor, Ike Eisenhower State Farm is there.
Hot Springs Village Inside Out, Dennis Simpson, Mr. Rick Marshall. We're talking about the glorious bonbon eating, laying on the couch, the money just pouring in lifestyle of realtors. Is that how it happens? I'm confused.
Well, I don't know if you're referring to the townhome hoarder that I had to crawl through the house to do the market analysis on, maybe, or whether you're talking about the people that I gave them advice on how to stage the home and then decided they loved it so much that they decided not to sell. Maybe it's one of those two, but yeah, it isn't always glamorous. Let's put it that way.
It's not just glamour. That's not the point necessarily I wanted to make. I got the not glamorous. Everybody's got some of that. Part of that is that when you're crawling under the townhouse, or when you're helping them, make their house look better.
Right.
I do that for any other purpose, if I'm working on wiring or whatever, it's a billable hour. But for you,
not so much. It's an all or nothing. That's right. That's true.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you should get that kind of all or nothing because you get 6% every time you sell a house, right?
Oh no, I'll take that if you're offering.
But that's not what you get, right?
No, that's not quite what works. No.
Break that side down. How does that work? Well,
commissions are obviously, if you consummate the transaction, then you get paid. But remembering that first of all, the commission is split in half. So the listing office gets half, the selling office gets half. Then the agent doesn't get all of that anyway. That they've got to split that with the office. Then they've got to pay their expenses, and then they've got to pay their taxes. So yeah, it's not quite as lucrative as most people say. Goodness, look at all the money you're making with, and a lot of those, like you just mentioned, I'll go out and do a market analysis, or I'll spend hours and hours and hours communicating back and forth with a potential client, and they have a change in circumstance. They decide not to relocate, or they decide not to sell, or they just have something that happens, and that's okay. If you think transactionally as a realtor, you stink.
Really? Well, and it's a matter of time till you run out of people too, right?
That's right. This is a relational business. If you serve your client, you treat them the way you would want to be treated and respected, you'll do well. You'll not only do well, they'll tell other people about you. I built my business on referrals. But if you treat it as a job, you treat it as a transactional income, you're going to have problem with longevity. And right now in this business, with the slowing economy and the number of transactions declining, it's always good to have a little bit of cleanse. There will be fewer agents next year than there are today. that 80-20 rule where
Yeah.
20% of the agents do 80% of the business.
Right.
It applies to real estate as much as it does to anything else, but it's an interesting business. Yes. I've crawled across the cat boxes and, the hoarder lady that every time that the cat filled the litter box, she just went out and bought a new litter box.
Like you do.
And you just keep stacking them higher. But I sold
Because you
that.
couldn't possibly throw away an old litter box. I mean, they have intrinsic value, right?
Yeah, right.
And DNA apparently.
Right. But in that example, yeah, I got paid because she told me, she confided in me, Rick, I know this is an illness. She acknowledged it. She said, she said, I'm really embarrassed. I don't know how to sell my property. I don't want really anybody to see it. Yeah. And I said, look, market exposure is the number one way for you to get as much as possible for your home. And she said, but I don't want market exposure. I just want it sold. And I said, well, then you give me a number that you'd be comfortable with. And let me see if I have a buyer for it, a realistic price, because this is not for everybody. Mm-hmm. And she came up with a price that was substantially lower than fair market value. But I mean, this was going to take, more than a shovel to empty out this townhome. Yeah. And I knew somebody that was capable of doing it, called him. I said, how much sweat equity are you willing to earn? And he bought that from her. She was ecstatic. Now, did she sell it well under market value? Yes. Did I get paid? Yes. But I connected a buyer and a seller that both had needs, and I satisfied that for each of them and got paid. So again, it's not transactional, it's relational. Put your client's interest as out front and stay focused on that, you'll be fine.
Wow. It sounds like a lot of work. It really does. I had heard, I guess this has been probably 10 years ago, but I had heard somebody say that the average realtor made less than the average teacher.
Oh, I'm sure of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, and in particular, and we need to talk, I know we're in a petri dish here. We're in another environment here, but the number of part-time realtors here in the village is very significant because they're semi-retired, right?
Right. Right. We've gone from about 120 agents in the village. I think we're in the 90s now, but there's still 90 plus agents in the village. And I don't want to be too specific, but yeah, the lower half of those agents make less than a teacher.
Wow. And I've got to be very specific because the instance that I was referring to, or the case that I was referring to, is that most other people, a teacher doesn't have to pay their own marketing expense. Kids just come in.
Right.
A teacher doesn't have to do desk duty, doesn't have to sit and wait no matter what, whoever calls and comes in the door at some point, and just sit and wait for somebody. And then the possibility of not being paid at all.
Right. Oh, I've spent months with a client, looking to buy a house, and then they decide either not to come or don't get the job transfer, whatever, and you get absolutely nothing. But, I don't believe in karma, so to speak, but you treat people right and it'll come back around to you. It really will. And I don't mean to complain at all. I absolutely love being a realtor. I do. I absolutely love it. And I can't imagine doing anything else. But yeah, there are definitely the frustrating days. I had a transaction that I was eager to get closed here about a month ago, and 3 days before closing, buyer decided not to move to Arkansas.
Just did they lose escrow or what?
Yes, defaulted on the transaction. So, but
unbelievable.
Unfortunately, that's a domino effect. You've done everything you can. The contract is solid. The earnest money is there, all of that, but you just have to say, we're going to sign the termination. We're going to move on, find another buyer. Let's get it done. And that client is super satisfied and happy with me, for the service. But there's roller coasters. This is one of those that's a feast or famine. It's not a occupation for the faint at heart when it comes to income. It's rather irregular. So
feast or famine, literal feast or famine. Well, I tell you what.
Can be.
Rick, because we need a little more context, and we've covered a little of this before, but I'd really love to hear the whole story. So you originally were a realtor in Seattle.
In
Well,
Seattle.
let me back up. You were born where?
Seattle, just
Okay.
south of Seattle. Born and raised there. And in the 1980s, I wanted to become a realtor, and my mother was a broker at a local real estate office, and I said, that's what I want to do. And she said, son, you're 18, you just graduated high school, not a lot of credibility with folks, to be,
Mhm.
representing them on their most valuable asset.
Maybe you should start shaving first before you're a realtor. Maybe.
Right. Well, I was doing that, but other than, so I went out and went into retail, and went into selling in jewelry stores. I had a 9-year career as a manager for Weisfield Jewelers up and down the West Coast. And and I enjoyed that. But by that time, come 1993, my mother was saying, hey, for the hours you're putting in and the occupation you're doing, maybe I should be recruiting you to come work in the office, because I think you do real well. And I was already doing real well in retail. So it took me 2 years to get off the ground, even with my mother as, as a model to follow, as to, how to do it, the template. It took 2 years to get to the income that I had left behind. And not everybody can do that, but I was fortunate to make it.
Right.
And
but now hang on, we're right around 1995 now.
correct.
Okay, but were these
1995.
the halcyon days of Seattle real estate at that time? I mean, you
Interest rate,
couldn't make a bad move.
no, interest rates were 8%. They were gradually
Really?
coming down. Yeah. It wasn't bad. But the average, the average home was 110, back in the day. So
Affordable.
yes, but it took more transactions to make some decent money too.
Sure. For sure.
So, things have changed, but, eventually became very successful in real estate, and then had one of those come to Jesus moments where I said,
Literally.
literally, and said, is there more to life? I mean, and I had a deep faith as a Christian, and talking with my wife, I said, you know what? I just feel like I'm fitting God into the time that's left over. And I don't feel comfortable about that. And we went on a vacation to Puerto Rico.
Yeah. Isn't that where she's from?
My wife was born and raised in Puerto Rico. Yes.
And by the way, in case there are questions, if people think that you and I resemble, or we're alike, or we have the same personality type, I will remind you that we both wildly overmarried. And I
We
hope
did.
she's not hearing that. So I'm just making note that's you and me and the
Yes.
thousands of listeners and viewers. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. We married up for sure.
Definitely.
And wonderful woman. And after we had a couple kids at the time, and we went down and visited, and it was a horrible week's vacation. It rained the entire time we were on the island. My wife had a distant cousin that passed away during our time, and we went to the funeral, and it was just an awful time. And on the flight back, I remember just thinking about all the different things that had happened over that week, and how terrible.
Hang on one sec. Did you mean for this to be a tourist type environment, or you were just going to visit her family, or
No, we were visiting her family. Yeah, her family. And we visited the poor side of the island, not the San Juan side on the north coast, the metropolitan. We were down in the barrio. Okay, so the roof leaked over the bed where we stayed. Okay, so it was very poor, and that was part of what we saw while we were there. We just saw kids that were caught up in selling drugs. There was just no future, and the word that hit both of us right between the eyes was a sense of hopelessness. Yeah. And there was no word that you could describe that. What's worse than hope, than not having even hope? You can have bad circumstances, but what's worse than not even having hope? And so that just really impacted us. And when I told her about a week later, I said, I haven't been able to get Puerto Rico off my mind. I don't know what it is. I just feel burdened and a draw. You'd think it would be almost like a, get out type of a thing, where you wouldn't want to come back, but yeah. I felt drawn back. And her jaw then dropped, and she said, well, that I felt that exact same thing while we were in Puerto Rico about coming here and doing something for these kids. And then my
hang
jaw
on.
dropped.
You're really nearly
Yeah.
like a God thing, huh? How about that?
Yep.
But so you say, okay, we need to do something. Okay, well, you're successful enough as a realtor, but you're not a multimillionaire. You know,
No.
what can you do? What can one guy do, or one couple do in this instance?
Right. And we didn't know really what that was. We knew we could write a check. We could send a check to a charity. And we actually checked with a couple missionary agencies and said, our heart is for the youth in Puerto Rico. What ministries do you have there? And it kept coming up. There's nothing there. There's nothing there.
Really?
And Puerto Rico is kind of a second world country. It's part of the United States as a territory. It feels third world, but it's not, because there's welfare and you do have, there's a little bit of a safety net there, but it's not first world either. It's just not quite.
So is it a kind of a hybrid thing? Because, and I had asked you one time, and I mean, couple of years ago, what do the average Puerto Ricans think about being part of the US or whatever? Very mixed bag, if I'm not mistaken.
It's split right about 50-50, with half would like to be the 51st state. The other half would kind of have a little bit of a, well, actually, it's not quite true. 45% would like to be citizens, or they're already citizens, would like to be the 51st state. Another 45% would like to keep it the way it is now, half in, half out type of a independence. The other 10% are diehard independents, resentful of the United States. So, and there's some mixed history, and rightfully so on some things and maybe not on others. But yeah, we were embraced while we were there, and we decided that we had the financial means to sell our rental properties and just go. We didn't know because there was no agency to go with, we were just going to go and find a way to serve. And so we relocated, flew out with our kids. Our family thought we were crazy. We shared it with our small group, our pastor. They all said, oh yeah, we could totally see you doing that. Easy for you to say, but
well, are you selling all your stuff and coming with us or what?
Right. But I mean, we had the 2 Acuras in the driveway, outside the 3-car crammed full garage full of stuff, and the 3,000 square foot. We had kind of the American dream, and it was nice, but it just I always tell people that I believe in 3 different levels. You have survival, stability. It's 4 levels. Sorry. Survival, stability, success, and then significance. And I think a lot of people get stuck at the success. They're doing great, but there's still something missing. I mean, why do
stuck there? Because it's comfortable.
Right.
It takes a lot of drive to move on up to those other levels.
Right. Why do so many famous people, end up, using drugs, committing suicide? They've got fame and money. Most people would say that that's success. Maybe not, but the significance is just another level. And we were really looking for that. We were looking to get beyond ourselves and try to do something good. We ended up getting our kids into a Christian bilingual school. We volunteered there for a while. We got fired as volunteers. That's a long story, but it was one of the assistant principals was jealous of the pastor and the superintendent making me the assistant superintendent. As a volunteer, I was unpaid, but the title made her upset, and he was going to lose somebody over it. Said, I got to let you go. And I said, we won't miss the income. I understand. He said, it's not personal. And I said, actually, it's 100% personal.
It's not personal. It's just that you're the person, and it's the person for the personal, and then it's probably personal. But it was not personal for me. It's personal for y'all, right?
Right. And I said, but we don't want to cause any problems here. We don't want any disruptions. He said, you can leave your kids here. They can continue here. We said, no, we'll take them with us. And that is what led to one of the a pastor in the town now, instead of 45 minutes away, a pastor in the town that we were living said, we're opening a school, a Christian bilingual school. And we said, oh, great, we need a place for our kids. By the time we were done interviewing her and she got caught wind of Liz being bilingual, my wife, she was like, I think you need to be a teacher here. And what that turned into was 7 years of helping them grow that school. Both my wife and I both taught at that school, and it went from 37 kids to 250 in that small local town. And so it was tremendously fulfilling. But eventually we got to a point where we were planning on returning to the States, yet we still had a heart for at-risk youth. We found the Arkansas Baptist Children's Home down in Monticello, and we volunteered to an interview that turned into being hired as house parents. And we were there for a couple of years, went for another additional year up to the Missouri Baptist Children's Home. And then by that point, our kids were empty nesters, son off to, being a Marine, daughter graduating college. The other daughter was already on her own. And I said, okay, honey, now what do we do? And she said, well, where do you want to live? We can go anywhere we want. And I said, yeah, I want to be on the water. I want to be on a lake. And we ended up on Lake DeSoto and back to real estate that I had enjoyed so much and been successful with, just adapted it back to here at the village, but back into real estate and what had done for years before that.
So a big, long, full circle.
A full circle back to real estate. That's right.
Well, and I was going to make note, I always love the story, and you've told it a couple of times to me personally, but the story about the school, I don't think we, as monolingual, I don't think we understand the true benefit that a school like this in an impoverished area. And sometimes it may not be first world, but it's not third world. So it's kind of second world, which kind of can be one of the worst worlds, because nobody comes rushing to your aid when there's a problem.
Right.
But at the other time, you aren't exactly enjoying the Ritz-Carlton at the same time, right?
Right. Yeah.
And what I was going to go with that is that explain just, and I know we need to be considerate of time here, but explain a little bit more about what learning English how did that help them change their career paths or their outlook? Did it give them hope? I don't know. What did it do?
Yeah, well, it was a combination of factors. Yes, becoming fluent in English was huge because that opened doors for them. And the school started with just a kindergarten and a first grade. And then the next year they added third grade. And the next year they added fourth grade. And the next year they added fifth grade, so they could keep those kids. And we left before we even got to the first graduating class. Oh, wow. And I had the same fourth graders for fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. So really got to connect with the kids. Yeah. It was a very immersive English. I wish I had gotten to be a little more fluent in Spanish, because I was doing all my instruction in English because they needed to learn English. But my kids came out of there bilingual, which was really beneficial for them. Yeah, so sure. they learned Spanish. But yes, in addition to the speaking English, though, it gave them a safe environment to learn. We had drive-by shootings on the street 1 block from our house.
In Puerto Rico.
Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, drive-by. My wife hit the floor as they, were shooting, and my wife's 2 half-brothers in Puerto Rico were both murdered while we were there.
While you were there.
While we were there. They unfortunately were involved in drugs, which is what so many of the kids, where they end up. And it was our first year down there, and we're trying to connect with them. And one of the family members comes running up the street yelling for my wife and said, Coco and Jorge, they've been found, they've been shot. They're dead.
Unbelievable.
And we just looked up and said, God, we're here serving you. What's going on?
Oh, my very favorite song of all time is I've said amen and it's still raining. God, right. I said amen. I prayed. What's the deal?
Right.
I don't think
so things that don't make sense. Right. I mean, they don't have to make sense, but it's like getting kicked in the teeth when you think you're doing great, and things like that, happen. But we saw some pretty amazing things come out of some of those things too. And we just, it was an amazing experience being there for 7 years.
No thing is good or evil of itself, but as the way it is used.
Right.
So, well, and let me go back to one other thing, and because I'm just a stinking curious guy like Randy. I had heard, and I know I'm not, I wouldn't call myself functional, hardly even in English, but I've heard that when you teach or learn another language, it's literally like gaining another worldview, because the way they say things, the way that they phrase their Spanish, their English, their Russian, their German, their whatever, it is a reflection of how, literally their mental thoughts. Am I close? I don't know. I'm negligent in those areas.
A couple of those things. Spanish is not Spanish is not Spanish. Just as Pak the Ka is not y'all come down, right? I mean, they both are English, but
right.
Different dialects for sure.
Barely.
Right. So that holds true. Puerto Ricans speak fast, very fast paced, but they sound different than Cubans or Mexicans or Venezuelans. So really? You have the different dialects, and you can tell between, and there's some words that I was literally at we taught English as a second language also in the evenings to adults. And I was reading the dictionary out loud, and I read the Spanish word for goat, and I said it out loud, and every head in the place turned and stared at me. And I said, "What did I do?" And my wife said, "Oh, no, in Puerto Rico, you can't use that word. Now in Mexico, you can use that word, but in Puerto Rico, you don't use that word."
Really? So
yeah,
it's a slang word or a
slang word, right? And there's other words that, for car, coche versus carro. Well, coche is a baby stroller in Puerto Rico, but that is what they would say in Mexico instead of carro for Puerto Rico. So there's differences. There's also differences in that culture. There's discrimination. I had to kind of scold my 8th graders at one point where they I heard them call me gringo. And
now, is that necessarily defamatory, or is that?
It was intended to be.
Okay.
The way they were using
the way they said it. Yeah.
Yes.
Stinking gringo. Yeah.
That's right. But I brought up to them, I said, you know what? I'm not offended by that, but let me tell you something. Did you know that the United States, a lot of people might call you Spix? And did you know that you're running down Dominicans? You're saying stupid Dominicans. And in the Dominican Republic, they're saying the stupid Haitians. I said, isn't that really kind of silly? We're all trying to find someone to put down lower than we are. And they kind of took from that lesson. And I said, so if you want to call me names, you can do that. But I'm just letting you know, it's not productive. And, it speaks to your heart. And it was a Christian school, so we were able to make a good lesson out of it.
Sure,
but it just kind of showed that it doesn't matter where on the rung you think you are. You're putting somebody down, but somebody's putting you down probably too. So there was definitely some cultural things that we had to discuss, and I had to learn as well, because I wasn't familiar with some of that.
Well, and I'm going to sneak in a little conversation we had at the DeSoto Club one night. Liz, your wife, who is Puerto Rican by birth, said she was discriminated against.
Right.
Because she wasn't Puerto Rican enough, or I don't know. What does that mean?
She was half Puerto Rican.
Oh.
And you have some of the same race, how dark of skin, how light of skin. I mean, just ridiculous stuff. But it just kind of shows that, again, people's perspective, something that I'll find somebody else to put down is kind of the attitude. It's like, that just doesn't make sense, So
every culture has an Aggie or a Polak. Is that what I'm hearing?
Basically, right? It's amazing.
Well, yep. Rick, honestly, I've wanted to ask you this on camera for a long time. Thank you so much for your interview. Thanks for, we moved from the pros and cons of being a realtor to kind of the bio story for you and Liz, and I really enjoy it.
I don't mind sharing it. Anything that you can do to help out other people. I've expressed to you before we tape this that I'm kind of reluctant to talk about it. I don't share necessarily with everybody. So when you asked me to share that, I was a little bit reluctant, but the truth, if you talk to somebody that's been on a short-term mission trip, they'll talk to you about how much they gained from it, not all the things they accomplished. And I feel that way too. I've been far more blessed by what we experienced and the blessings on my family than what we accomplished in the mission field. So
Right. Well, and I'm the song that comes to my mind is "Thank You for Giving to the Lord."
Yeah.
There are lives that won't be completely changed until after you and I both are in the dirt.
Yeah, I look forward to meeting him up there and sharing some of that again.
Oh, well, Rick, as always, it's a pleasure. Hot Springs Village, Inside Out, Dennis Simpson, Mr. Rick Marshall. We will see you next time.
Thanks for watching and listening to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a weekly podcast starring Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Visit the website at hotspringsvillageinsideout.com.